All right, let's dive into a story that's completely true, pieced together from actual historical documents. It's about 10 people, right? They're trapped in a carriage during the Franco-Prussian War, and their journey, well, it turns into this absolutely chilling portrait of betrayal.
So, let's set the scene. You've got to imagine this. Occupied France, January 1871. The nation is defeated. The French army, basically in pieces. And you can hear the boots of Prussian soldiers marching through the streets. It's a time of just raw fear and humiliation. Nobody knows what's going to happen next.
You know, a war correspondent back then just nailed the feeling. He wrote about this sense of total terror, like being caught in some huge disaster where you're completely at the mercy of this brutal invading force. And that's exactly the world our story kicks off in.
So, right in the middle of all this chaos, a little group, 10 people, they somehow managed to get a pass to get out of the city of Rouen. And these aren't friends, they're total strangers from all different walks of life, all crammed into this one carriage with just one thing on their minds: escape.
And here's the thing. We actually know how the Prussians saw this group. Why? Because we have their intelligence reports. It's incredible. They basically sized everyone up. The nobles and businessmen? Predictably self-interested. The Democrat? All talk, no action. But one woman, Elizabeth Rousset, they flagged her as vehemently hostile. And you'll see, that cold, calculated assessment turned out to be spot on.
Okay, so they're on their way, trying to escape, but it doesn't last long. A huge snowstorm hits and their carriage gets stuck. They're forced to stop at an inn in this tiny town called Tutz, and just like that, they're under the thumb of the local Prussian commander. Their journey is over before it's really even begun.
And the officer, he zeroes in on one person. Guess who? Elizabeth Rousset, the woman the Prussians had already marked as a problem. He makes let's call it a private request, and he makes it very clear. Until she says yes, nobody in that carriage is going anywhere. They're all hostages.
And her response? We know exactly what she said because the Comtesse wrote it in her diary. It was immediate, it was firm, I will not go. Just like that, she refused to give in to the enemy. She was drawing a line in the sand, really, for the dignity of the whole group. And for a minute there, it really felt like they were all in it together.
Yeah, that feeling didn't last long at all. The outrage they all felt at the officer's nerve, it started to curdle. Pretty soon, the inconvenience of being stuck was a lot more important than any high-minded principle. And that's when a nasty little plot started to cook up among the so-called respectable passengers.
I mean, the way they broke her down was just clinical. It was like a siege, but on her conscience. First, they all pretended to be shocked and outraged. Then, the wine merchant's wife says what everyone's thinking. I mean, since it is her job, why should she refuse? And boom, that just opened the floodgates. The men started reasoning with her, the women started using religion and history. It was a full-on assault until she was just worn down, totally alone, and finally, she gave in.
And get this, the Comtesse just straight up admits it in her diary. She writes, "We all pressed her until she finally yielded. And when she did give in, her words were heartbreaking. She just says, 'I'm doing it for you, of course.' A total surrender. She sacrificed herself so they could be free."
But not everyone bought this noble sacrifice narrative. A Republican newspaper, writing from exile, saw it for exactly what it was. They called it cowardice, plain and simple. They wrote about how these passengers twisted history, twisted religion, all to convince a woman that patriotism meant prostituting herself for their comfort. So the next morning, the officer is true to his word. The carriage can leave. They're free. But that freedom, it came at an awful price, a price paid by just one person. And the mood inside that carriage, it was about to get way, way worse than any prison cell. So you have the public story, right? The official newspaper, which was basically controlled by the Prussians, said the delay passed without notable incident. Pretty boring. But then you have a private letter from one of the passengers, and it tells the real, chilling story. She writes, "The woman was quite rightly shunned. Shunned."
And their cruelty was just as calculated as their plot to get her to give in. The second she gets back in the carriage, they all literally turn their backs on her, like she's contagious. Then they start unpacking these big, fancy lunches and just eat right in front of her, not offering a single crumb. And of course, the hypocrisy of it all is just too much. She starts to weep.
And this is maybe the cruelest detail of all. As she's sitting there sobbing,
The merchant's wife leans over and whispers that she's crying because she's ashamed. They were so completely wrapped up in themselves, they couldn't even imagine she was crying because of what they did to her, not because of what she had done.
But in this carriage just overflowing with contempt, one person finally does something. It's not a big speech, there's no fighting, it's just a quiet protest. But it's an act that ends up being more powerful than any of them could have realized.
It's the Democrat, Cornudet, the guy who hadn't said a word while they were pressuring her. He starts to whistle. And what does he whistle? The French national anthem, La Marseillaise. And you have to understand, he wasn't doing this for the Prussians outside. No, this was for the passengers inside. He made them listen to this epic anthem about patriotic sacrifice, while the woman they had just sacrificed for their own convenience sat right there crying.
And Cornudet, he wrote about it in his diary. He connected her very personal, very real pain to the tragedy of the whole nation. He wrote that her sobs, mixed in with the anthem, that was the true, sad music of a defeated France, betrayed from within. Wow.
Now this ugly little drama in a single carriage, it didn't just stay there. People noticed, especially the Prussians. They saw it as a perfect little microcosm, a perfect symbol of the moral rot that was weakening the entire country.
And that final Prussian intelligence report on the whole thing, it is just brutally clear. Their analysis was basically, the rich middle class, they'll trade any moral for comfort. The aristocrats, they'll set up the dirty deal and then pretend they had nothing to do with it. The revolutionaries, just a lot of hot air. And the common person, well, they're the only one with any real dignity, and they're the one who pays the price. For the Prussians, this wasn't just about a carriage. It was a total psychological win.
You know, that Republican editorial really summed it all up. The journey of that carriage, that was the journey of France. Hijacked by an enemy? Sure. But the real tragedy? It was being betrayed from the inside, by the very people who were supposed to be its leaders.
So, that leaves us with a really tough question, doesn't it? The passengers, they told themselves they were just doing what they had to do to survive. Elisabeth Rousset, she made a huge sacrifice for them. So when history looks back on this, who's the real patriot? Is it the one who makes the sacrifice, or is it the ones who demand it?